Good afternoon, everybody. I am so pleased to be here to talk to my friend Patrick. Hey, Patrick.
What's up, Lauren?
I'm going to start by talking a little bit about your artistic background because I think it's important to contextualize the work you're making now. So you're in the third phase of your artistic career. Some people may not realize it, but you've had this incredible arc whereby your first approaches to painting were these like literal sort of realistic portraits. Then you go away from this entirely and you break into a period of producing these emotive and sort of dark abstract works. And then finally you return to figurative painting in 2018. But the figurative works that emerged after your abstract period, or perhaps emerged from your abstract period, are not those of your early career. So to begin today, I have two questions for you that reference this arc and your creative journey so far. Firstly, your very first and earliest artistic heroes were actually Pollock, de Kooning, and Rothko. So given this, tell us why you think you actually started with classical figurative portraits. You had such a deep admiration for these mid-20th century abstractionists. So why did you decide to start your career with portraits?
Well, first off, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, the team. Thank you, Lauren. So my journey is, I guess, a little different. I've worked many jobs through my young life. It wasn't always related to art. I picked it up at the age of 27. It's kind of like more of a therapeutic type of way of approaching things. Like I would draw at my desk at work, and people would come by and say, "Oh, you can draw." I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool," you know. And you know, not going to school for art and going to school for other things. Once I really started to get into it, I realized I need to learn what the hell I was doing, right? And so naturally, I think portraiture was like the first way to figure out what your skills really were, right? I didn't even know what abstract art really was and what it was about at first. I didn't understand it, you know. But being in New York, being from New York, you know, we're the MoMA's there, you know. Every time I take a trip to a museum, it's all these wonderful expressionists and like great large pieces. And I'm a big guy, I'm like, I want to do that. Those are big, you know, I could feel it. But I had to understand it first, you know. I had to get the technical aspects of it down. I had to understand it. And then I quickly realized it's a spiritual journey, you know, it's completely spiritual. So I started tapping into it more. My immediate circle were like, what the hell is this? Like, you know, what are you doing? We're so used to just getting these like very literal images from you, and they would purchase them for like $50, $100, and I was like, yes. But I dove into it, and it just became everything I ever wanted and searched for. I've done music, I've done all different types of things. It just completely fulfilled me. I would work for hours and hours and hours, not eat, and just dive into the abstraction.
So how did you know when it was time? I mean, is there anything, when you finally started making the abstract pieces, that is, what were some of the guiding forces? You know, were there corresponding changes in your life that made it feel like the appropriate time to explore these immaterial renderings or forms?
I mean, I think it was just coming into myself at that age. I was leaving, you know, I used to work, I was a financial advisor, right? So I had a very structured life. I put on a beautiful suit on every day. I was satisfying my parents, you know, at that point. And then living in like Williamsburg or like, you know, Bushwick, I was surrounded by such creative people that I knew that that's what I always had something more to offer to the world, right? And so abstract was just fulfilling me in that way. And I just really dove into it, and it taught me so much of how to actually get move away from not all technical aspects, but allow yourself to be free and make those mistakes. And
so it was a response to sort of this highly organized, sort of contained, safe space.
Right.
You jumped out of this
I was like, I'm
literal
free.
portraiture and dove
I'm gonna do
into
it. I started growing my hair out. I had like dreads covering my face. You couldn't even see my face. You know, I was just like really going for it. And so I eventually moved away from the 9 to 5 with the support of my wife and who was then my girlfriend. We kind of just rode the wave, you know. And fast forward, you know, I've always, you know, I continued to draw. I never really abandoned it. I always did both, you know. Yeah. It's what I showed the world, you know, it's what I put out there. But then you know, something about it, I can actually achieve the same feeling through a portrait that I'm doing with abstract, you know, and I didn't think that was possible at first because I didn't quite understand how, you know, you can do that. Then I started studying some of the greats in that genre. And it took me over as well, you know, because now I can tell a story that even those who weren't familiar with abstract, like my immediate circle of friends and family, now my mother can look at it and say, oh my gosh, I feel that and I understand it. She didn't understand the abstract too much, right? And so although this is a very selfish act and I'm doing this, it's cathartic and everything, I understand that my act of love is putting it out in the world, right? And so putting it out in a way that those that I truly love can receive it and we can talk about it. And to put together an exhibition like this where I can invite my mother and my grandmother and they can be like, oh, I know that doesn't look like me, but I know that's me, you know, like, you know, and so it's really important for me.
I think of that's perfectly said, because I do think of your current portraits, like not the ones of your early career, as sort of like a consumable abstraction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, let's talk about Haiti.
Yeah.
50 pounds describes the maximum weight of a single piece of luggage allowed on an airplane. And what you bring to the fore with this title is just how limiting 50 pounds is and how urgent it must feel when one is faced with packing and indeed reducing their entire lives into 50-pound units. The immigration story is about as American as it gets. And for first and even sometimes second generation Americans, it becomes a story of other people's memories and family lore, rather than things they experienced themselves. And that isn't to say that this doesn't still shape who they are or impact their worldview. Quite the contrary, it absolutely does, as is evident in your recent body of work. And these stories passed down become family mythology, a type of religious allegory almost. Give us an example from your own family legend. Many people, of course, on both sides of your family have stories about not only immigrating from Haiti, but their continued status as immigrants here in the United States. And these stories that you've shared with me, Patrick, are stories of challenges and fear, but also of victory and celebration. Could you share just one of your family immigration stories? I know that's tough because there's so many.
No, yeah, no,
they can hear them all when you write the book, but
it's coming, I guess.
For now, could you share one of your favorites?
Oh, absolutely. Just because it's the stories that, and I speak to my mother, as a lot of us may be privileged enough to do, and very often. And she came over when she was 12 from Haiti and moved to East New York, Brooklyn. And now, if anyone's familiar with East New York, Brooklyn, at that time was a really dangerous neighborhood to live in, right? Super dangerous. She didn't understand the language. She dressed in a certain way that she would get bullied and teased and beat up and all that, but she understood that education was gonna be her way out of this whole situation. She came over. Unfortunately, her biological father wasn't. Initially, he was there, but they kind of separated, and she kind of had to navigate this whole thing, her mother and herself, through East New York, Brooklyn, try to figure this thing out. Fast forward, she's a Columbia grad, you know, married to my father, who's a wonderful engineer, and they both had very similar stories. They met in East New York. He chased her for like 3 years. She said, "Get the hell away!" But he won her heart by tutoring her, you know, tutoring her in math. That was her weak point. And so they instilled education in us. That was just the thing, you know. And many of those who come from the Caribbean, or I mean, pretty much anywhere in the world, education is the key, you know.
It's quite savvy of your father.
Oh, like he was smooth though. He was smooth about it.
She was like, "Look, I'm trying to focus on school." He's like, "I got you."
He spent three years of tutoring her, you know, and didn't get a kiss, nothing for 3 years, and then eventually she was like, "All right, this guy's, you know, this is where it's at, right?" And so their stories, I mean, it's a lot of our stories, but it's a wonderful story. And just to see how far she's come, there's 4 of us, 4 children. She has 5 grandkids, and she was here, and she was able to kind of soak it all in, and that's a one story that I guess.
And your father was also an immigrant as well, right? So they had that in common.
They had that in common, and he stayed in the books. He didn't go outside because it was dangerous outside. He stayed in the books. Now me, I don't know. I was told I did what I had to do, but I was outside, right? And I was enjoying it. So that push and pull. So when I decided to kind of walk away from my 9 to 5 and do art full time, I was scared. I was like, hey, they're not going to be with this. But the Haitian culture appreciates art just as much as they would if you were to become a doctor. They celebrate it. Yeah. And I wasn't used to that. And I didn't understand that we celebrated art the way that they did until, looking at my mom's collection, I'm like, why do we have so much work in this house? Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful to see them here supporting you on opening. Yeah, it's incredible.
Dope.
So that was a little bit of a love story, but you have so many. When you've told me of the various immigration stories and personal tales of struggle and ultimately stories of overcoming, there's this thread kind of weaved through your family stories of love. Talk about the presence of love. For sure.
So, my grandmother, this is a very personal show for me. I'm sorry, guys, but it's very personal. So my grandmother was very, very poor in Haiti. And she lived in a small shack, in a sense, for lack of a better term. But she would feed the entire neighborhood somehow, some way. Don't know how she did it. This story is told to me through my mom's lens as a young girl. She said the line went for miles. Probably didn't go for miles, but she's young. So she did that, and my step-grandfather, who I actually do know more as my grandfather, was a missionary from Belgium, and his church overlooked her yard. And he initially thought that she was doing part of the church work, and she wasn't. This is just what she was able to try to do. Her and her mother would just find ways to feed people that were even less fortunate than her. And so he went down and started helping her with the project. And they started feeding people, and it became part of the church process, and more resources to be able to feed more. And long story short, he had to leave his priesthood because he couldn't marry being a priest. And they were like, no, we're getting married, this is it, And so she made her way to the US with him in East New York. Okay, so this is East New York. He's a white man from Belgium, right? Back in that time.
Who left the priesthood for her.
Who left the priesthood for her, right?
Okay.
And so they're like, who are these people, right? And growing up, I remember him they call him Poppy Joe. He took care of the entire neighborhood, fixing everyone's bikes, and they continued that good work in New York. Right.
And that's love too.
Yeah, and that's what our family is built on, and we try our best to kind of give back as much. And thankfully, you guys are showing me love by being here to receive this, but I'm outpouring this in an act of love, for real.
Thank you for that. We feel the love, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have just one more question because I'm dying to hear what the audience wants to ask you. And my final question is going back to Haiti. As someone who has lived myself in the so-called third world and travels quite often, I always relish the opportunity to celebrate the beauty of many of these places and how this beauty persists despite violent colonial legacies and continued foreign intervention and exploitation. When the electricity goes out here in the US or the internet fails, we lose our minds. People might riot. But if you're in a place where the electricity always goes out, maybe you just take the opportunity to look up at the stars, or you burn candles and the party continues. Life can just take on this beautiful simplicity, and I find that for people who have not centered their entire value systems and sort of sense of self-worth around their jobs, have this capacity to nurture meaningful relationships and community building and laughter, no matter the conveniences they lack, they're more resilient. When you finally started traveling to Haiti on your own and creating some of your own memories and experiences on the island, I'm sure you experienced some of this. Mm-hmm. Tell us about Patrick's Haiti. What is good or special about Haiti that is unknown or underrepresented?
Well, man, you touch on a lot of it. I mean, it's the resiliency. It's the ability to find peace and happiness amongst any situation. The first time I ever traveled to Haiti was in 2010 after the earthquake that kind of devastated the whole country. So I never got to see Haiti before that. But it felt almost as if it never happened, right? I'm looking at, obviously, the infrastructure and everything collapsed. They never really cleaned up Haiti, to be honest with you. So year after year after year, the same building is crumbled. Even the palace, which is, our White House, was crumbled for years, But the people just kept moving and kept going. My first series of portraits were photos that I took in Haiti of little kids, and they were just happy to see the camera, so they would just go crazy with the camera. So I have a lot of smiling images, and that's how I learned how to really draw a face, really, But there's such a great history of Haiti, and one that has almost been suppressed in a way. For one reason or the other. We can talk about that another time. But these people, they have really changed the world, right? Especially in the Western Hemisphere. And they know that.
Talk about that a little bit.
Talk about it?
Unpack that a little, just a little.
Well,
without a whole lecture on anti-colonial history or whatever.
Right, we beat Napoleon. I don't know what else to say about that. We kicked his ass, right? And so, they
and then helped other countries.
And it helped other countries to do the same.
Get their freedom.
And get their freedom,
powers.
And it kind of trickled on. And I think freedom for the black man and woman on this side of the earth, can be accredited to what Haiti did. I don't know how they did it. They didn't have as many guns, but that's a spirituality, and then we can tap into that too. But knowing that history and going there and knowing that they know their history, but still not able to eat 3 meals a day, still not have the light, and still aspire to come to America, right? It's one of those things that, it kind of messed with me for a while. I was trying to understand, I understand things are tough here, but do you really want to go there? And that kind of my mother came here when she was 12, my wife came when she was 12, she's also Haitian. They have very similar stories of wanting to come to America, excited to get here, And then they arrive in East New York, Brooklyn with bars on the window, and the community is no longer caring about them. They're not raised by the community at that moment. It's stay inside and stay safe. So that's a story, that's something that kind of resonates through this as well. So in some of these portraits,
The propaganda is that it's a land of freedom.
Yeah.
So it's really powerful imagery for me to hear you say, then they went to their homes with bars on the window and were told not to leave the house.
Absolutely.
In the United States.
Right, and for my wife to say that, coming here at 12, obviously, she's a lot younger than my mother, for them to have a very similar story, it really had an impact on me. And so I wanted to tell their story through these works. And many other stories from many other countries of people migrating to a new place and trying to figure things out, There's so much hope, anxiety, there's so many things going on at the same time.
Yeah, an island full of hopeful people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I know that I started this conversation speaking about sort of reducing your career into 3 artistic phases so far. Those are just ones that are very easy and clear to mark. And I'm sure there will be several more. I want to thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
This exhibition is a monument to your family, and I'm sure that we're all very grateful that you have been so personal and so vulnerable in this work, and that you've shared these personal stories with us. It's very, very generous. Oh, Can we give Patrick a round of applause for sharing his story?
I appreciate it. Thank you all.